Okay, I want to go over a few more things on my concept of how this redoubt and survival retreat and relocation thing should play out 2013 for people who want to be really serious about this whole survivalist prepper thing. Uh, it's something that I've advocated for a long time is having a survival retreat, but not necessarily living there full time. There's a lot of economic realities in this country, especially since I've been in the scene for a very long time, since easily the late 1980s. And I moved to a retreat in the early 90s, which turned out to be, mostly a failure. And a lot of it had to do with some interpersonal issues, a lot of personal greed on the part of the people involved. We had people there who they were messed up in the head because they had done a lot of drugs, and they were not majorly fucked up, but they brought other people in who were, and it turned into a bad situation. And because of that, some of the people closest to me wanted to do the individual survival retreat thing. Hey, it's only going to be friends and family. It's only going to be such a small inner circle that we're going to know what we're dealing with. And the problem with that extreme is you end up isolated. And we did a lot of research. We found an area that was supposedly a good area. And it turned out that we learned the hard way that there's predatory people in some of these areas. And they did some bad things, which I'll detail later on. But the other thing that happens in the remote areas, a lot of times there's a lack of an economy. And you have to be able to either travel to the economic centers or do business in a way where place doesn't matter. Now, at the time, I was doing a lot of internet related business that the location didn't matter. I no longer needed to be in California to conduct my business. I could conduct it over the internet. However, I did run into a problem where, due to the remoteness of the area, I couldn't get high speed internet when it became normal for people to have high speed internet. When when I had to do a lot of face-to-face business, it meant road trips, and that's just reality. Right now, I live in a major city, but I'm making connections with people that have some of the backwoods places. And one of the things that everybody needs to understand is that it takes a tremendous amount of supplies to stock a survival place, even for 6 months. And we're not even talking a year. Even to stock a place for 6 months, it's a tremendous amount of supplies. A lot of the people that live out in those backwoods areas are scavengers. They're going to have a different concept of right and wrong than somebody who has to live with neighbors close by. A lot of them are drug addicts. A lot of them are very long-term generational residents to some of those areas who feel entitled to anything that happens there. That's what I ran into in rural Oregon. They didn't like outsiders. They didn't like outsiders making money. There was a tremendous amount of jealousy issue that happens in rural Oregon, especially in review of outsiders. And that's apart from anybody's concept of right wing, left wing, any of that. You're going to find you're dealing with a lot of people that just aren't bright enough to know the difference, and that's reality, folks. But one of the things that was a difference between me and a lot of those people is that I had a very extensive online life. Those people, they did have government connections. If they spotted somebody with what they felt was an illegal weapon or overheard something, they would drop the dime in a hurry. And their idea of the mother lode is if they could get a real survivalist locked up in jail and then go loot the house while the guy's in jail. You have those quality of people, especially in rural Oregon. You have those quality of people in a lot of rural parts of Washington and California. I don't know about Idaho. I've only traveled there a little bit. But it's one of the places that's been picked for the American Redoubt. And John Wesley Rawls has been able to vet a lot of these people with regards to real estate brokers. Here you can see some that are very survivalist specific. They're good at getting some people together. But what's really happening, and they've got some good maps, but one thing that's happening is they're still in that kind of paradigm of you want to have a, the little cabin in the woods, a little getaway place, a little outlaw hideout. And there's definitely a value in having that for a lot of things. It's just really hard to make a living and raise a family in an environment like that where you would have a strong expectation of a decent standard of living unless you still have a lot of outside contact. In another survivalist thing, there's a guy building this cabin. Reality of these places is in the United States, a lot of these are not a full-time residence. But if you live in a city and you want to participate in the real economy, and I can tell you that when people were predicting the end of the world back in the early 90s, there was a lot of people predicted the end of the world and said, oh, get out of the cities, don't be in a city, they're going to be all this and that. They would have every evidence of it being a message from God. Well, the reality is the world didn't end. And a lot of fortunes were made, some fortunes were lost. A lot of people would move, leave jobs, move to the backwoods, give up a lot of corporate or career futures and things. And, what do you tell the leader of that organization? Hey, dude, you were wrong. The world didn't end, and I left a really good job, or, we broke up with a loved one over it. If they're a real dyed-in-the-wool cult leader, they don't give a shit, okay? But there is a lot of value to having a backup plan, even if you're not going to live there full time. And in a growing hostility of a political climate, okay, you're going to have a situation where we're probably going to have a shift in national politics where there's going to be a reduced amount of sympathy for people that have traditionally conservative values, for people, especially libertarians. Let me tell you something. What you think of as right-wing people, truly, not only do the truly right-wing people hate libertarians, they feel entitled to intervene against libertarians whenever and whatever ways are possible. We saw that with the pursuit to the Hootery group. It was MDC, it was Fox News. Those people were the ones talking about it. I don't think the Hootery were even discussed much on CNN. I don't think the far left really had a lot to say about it. A lot of when conservatives wanted somebody to throw under the tires, they were throwing a Hootery under there. Okay. It turned out it was another militia group that turned them in and was pointing the FBI in their direction. It was the Michigan militia people. And if somebody wants to say that Michigan militia is frothing at the mouth of the liberal, that's not true. Okay, and I'm not even going to say that the Hootery were libertarian. I kind of, they have their own channel. They can speak for themselves. They're really their own animal, but they a lot of them did get smart. They figured out how to live together, and at least have some backup plans. Although, for the most part, these are kind of trailer park, lower middle class people. They just weren't able to pool the level of resources that it would take to take on a major government. Now, in spite of all of those big, bad conspiracy theories about Zionists running the world, there is a series of issues with modern Zionism and enclaves. It's a big issue. It's been going on for a while, which is after, a series of conflicts between Israelis and Palestinians. There was a lot of disputed land in the West Bank of Jordan there, and the Israelis, a lot of Jews worldwide, are wanting to go there. Now, they were going to that area before the Israel-Palestinian conflict. But what happened was the conflict came about as the map was changing, as people became more intolerant of each other, began to assert a lot of issues over ownership on land that nobody had bothered to improve on for 1,000 years. I can tell you that left to its own, that land over there on the eastern side of the Mediterranean, listen, it's a shithole, okay? You know, you can talk about how God gifted it to the Jews. You could also say God forsake it to the Jews. Okay, this is not Yosemite. Okay, it's a shithole. Okay, people are moving in and fixing things up, but left to its own devices, it's rocky hard land. Even the air is not that great. Okay, it's rocky hard land, and you got people going in and fixing it up. Now, when we talk about enclaves that are political and social enclaves, these people who aren't getting along would never survive with somebody as truly their next door neighbor or living in their same building that hates them. Yet here in the United States, you know, there's a lot of people, and this is whether you're Jewish or Palestinian. Okay, they figured out if anybody on a family level needs to survive, they got to be in separate enclaves. But there's a lot of survivalists and conservatives and libertarians in this country here in the U.S. who assume that they're going to continue to be safe living in and with people who are against them. There was a guy here in Massachusetts. It got plastered all over the news. Busted for weapons cache. His guns, it turned out, were all legal. Okay. What he had was a couple of disputable issues on non-lethal rubber ball grenades that he had gotten somewhere. And yet they were plastering his guns all over the news. They're talking about what a nut job he was. It turned out the person who turned him in was his wife. Okay. This guy had apparently been, you know, he was a prepper. He had something. Somebody lacked the understanding of, you know, maybe she was setting him up for a divorce. She didn't like the money he was spending on that stuff. This guy in Massachusetts was probably a guy who would have benefited a lot with hooking up with a survival group and supporting an enclave, even though his job and his business and all these other things had to have him in the middle of Massachusetts. Let me tell you something, folks. Massachusetts is not our turf. Okay, it is not libertarian turf. If you're into guns, you're into freedom, Massachusetts isn't your turf. And this guy was in a situation where he thought he was safe, you know, but his wife turned him in. You have to make realistic assessments of where you are and why you're there when you get into this thing, because there are people who will hate you and they will act against you. So I'm going to continue this in another video.